There's always that one jammy little who seems to have everything their way. They just walk into situations. It's always the case. All these great photographers who just happen to be, oh yeah, my mum was Cher and we just happened to be hanging out with the Chili Peppers and they let me shoot their album cover. That's not a true story, but you get the gist. There's a lot of this. And there was a great comment in a video recently going, this is all great, Scott, but can you just talk about the impact of good luck on being a professional photographer? And I'm going to talk about that because I myself has had good luck, and I'm going to talk you through the bizarre chain of events that led me to being here. And then we're going to break down what was luck and what was hard work. When was I jammy? This is like a British phrase. I don't know if this translates well to the rest of the world. And when did I just work hard? So, first of all, I live in England. That is pretty jammy. I had no choice over that whatsoever. I was born a white man in England. Regardless of your political ideologies, I'm sure that you can't say that I didn't have a good lot in life. Came from a poor family. My dad worked in a factory on minimum wage. Mum didn't work. Parents split up. The usual sort of thing. I then worked very hard at university. I was the first to go to university in my family. Had to get my teacher to forge my mum's signature because she wasn't sure whether it was a safe thing for me to do to go to university. So got myself into university, did all my studying and all the rest of it. I fell in some hard times, ended up in some rather dicey scenarios, no money, nowhere to live. But I got myself back on track, and the British system is great because they look after you when it goes wrong. In a lot of countries, if that had happened to you, you'd have just fallen through the gaps. Being born here, very lucky. Now my career as a photographer. I started out and I managed to borrow my first camera from my uncle. That is luck. My uncle had a camera and he's a nice guy and he lent it to me. I didn't have the money to buy one. If that situation hadn't have happened, I probably wouldn't be a photographer today. It just wasn't viable for me to buy a camera. Not at all, not even slightly. Maybe I'd have waited out and done it later on, but I'd have probably found something. I don't know. Might not have happened. That one bit of good luck there starts the whole process. I'm then living in Cardiff. And my first shoot is a magazine cover. And I got this because I was at a party where somebody else was who was a photographer. They double booked themselves. They set up the studio and gone, you're into photography. I'll set it all up. Go and take the pictures. It's really easy. It's like a pop band. They'll just do poses for you. Off I went, did the job. Magazine cover, straight in there. Very good. That was lucky because I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. All chance. If I didn't know that guy, I wouldn't have done that shoot. And maybe I wouldn't have made it as a photographer. Don't know. We then look at other things. Like I was a portrait photographer for years. 10 years I was a portrait photographer for. Struggling portrait photographer. I did all right. Made enough money to live. It was all right. Shot some adverts and billboards. Did a bit of TV work. The usual stuff. I worked really hard. There was not many breaks in there. And then one day I shot the book cover of my now girlfriend as a portrait shoot. I shot that portrait, thought nothing of it. Off I went on my merry way, carried on with my life. And then her agent got in touch about some other work that was needed doing. I didn't know about agents back then. Wasn't sure. Now, I was 10 years into my career at this point. I've been working my, bits off. And the reason I got this portrait sitting was because I happened to email the marketing team of the people who do the publishing of that book on the day that there'd been a phone call to say the original photographer had really messed it up and they weren't happy with the pictures. And then because I'd been working so hard and so long in my area, everybody knew who I was. So my name was already recognizable to my now girlfriend. And she was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's get Scott in. He'll come and shoot the portrait. Shot the book cover. I quite like it. It looks pretty good. But back to her agent. Her agent started chatting to me and I was like, I'm really struggling here. I've got too much work. Some of it's big, some of it's small. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm chasing invoices. It's all chaotic. There was a short conversation of how much do you earn? I told him and he went, I'll represent you and take my percentage. And he did. I was with him for 5 years, 6 years maybe. And that was a great line of happenstance. A photographer messed up a shoot. My email hit the inbox on that day. Somebody already knew who I was. The portrait sitting was happening in my city. What are the chances? That is pure luck. But I sent the email. I worked so hard that people know who I am. And my work was of good quality. That is hard work. And it's the two merging together. Now, fast forward a bit. I start working with my now girlfriend, and we start shooting food. She was like, why don't you shoot food? I don't think you like doing portraits. It seems to stress you out a lot. I was like, it does stress me out a lot. It is really not for me. If I hadn't have met her, I'd still be a portrait photographer today, and I'd hate it, I'm sure. So we started shooting food. We did, the style of the time, sort of Jamie Oliver look of food photography. We shot some adverts for, who were we shooting adverts for? Papa John's, Dolmio, Deli France, those sorts of people. Very traditional brands. And it was going good. Going really good, making good money, doing lots of shoots, very busy. And then COVID hit. And COVID hit hard. And during COVID, I say during COVID, just before lockdown happened, we were away in Chipping Norton, which is like the bit you go to when you want a country break from London. And I happened to be reading a newspaper article about pop art. I wish I could find the article. I've tried because people keep asking me. Can't find it. I'm sorry. But I was reading this article and I really struggled with reading. And my girlfriend was like, why are you reading this? And I was like, it's really interesting. She's like, you really like pop art, don't you? I was like, oh, I love bold and graphic sort of stuff. She's like, why don't you make your food work look like that? And I was like, okay, so let's do it. So lockdown happened. And in the first week, I had a bit of a breakdown because I realized that I pretty much only identify by my work and my status in my industry. So I went and started shooting. I got one lens. I took a 100mm prime, a Canon 5DSR and a 500-watt Bowens light with a reflector. That's all I had. And I shot an entire body of work. And I was like, right, let's send it to the big agents. We sent it to some agents, and one agent got back to me and went like, I've got some work for you. I'm not going to name all these different agents in this, but they were like, we've got some work for you. Come and shoot these campaigns for us. You live with a stylist, because my girlfriend at this point was food styling as well. You've got your own studio. You can work during this period of lockdown. So we shot some big adverts for them. Again, lived with a stylist. Had my own studio during lockdown. All of these things are like right place at right time. But I managed to make my girlfriend tolerate me, which is, a lot of work. I managed to get a studio, build a studio, keep a studio during lockdown because I didn't spend too much money. And that allowed me to do that. Some of it's luck, some of it's hard work. I then sent out my body of work to everybody and I signed with Lisa Pritchard. And from there, we shot some bigger campaigns. And you sort of go, well, it's just, you signed with Lisa because you'd already got an agent. And you look back on all these things and a lot of it is happenstance. But if I wasn't in it to win it, I wouldn't be there. If I wasn't putting in the work, I wouldn't have those breaks. And it sounds from these little things like, oh, good luck, good luck, good luck, good luck. But what you don't see is the 10 years of graft. And the years in between, those 6 years between Graham and Lisa, hard work. And then the luck hits. And of course, a lot of it is good luck. Lisa signed me after losing a food photographer. Another agent couldn't sign me because they just gained a food photographer. These things are kind of there's a bit of luck going on there. But if you're not in it and if you're not doing it, how can you possibly say you've got bad luck? How can you possibly blame luck or accuse other people of being lucky and that's how they've made it? It's not just the luck, it's the work you put in to be in a position to receive the luck. And that all sounds very wishy-washy, but if my work wasn't good and I sent that email into the company when I got the book cover shoot, I wouldn't have got it. If I hadn't have been a prolific shooter doing test shoots all the time, people wouldn't know who I am. So you kind of make your own look in this world, which is a saying, I'm not a fan of sayings because they're just words. I don't mean anything. Oh, you make your own look. It doesn't really mean anything. But what I feel that it shows is that if you consistently show up, you'll be there when the look happens. Those chances are going to happen anyway. And the person who receives that good luck is the person who is there on the day because they've put the work in. So stop blaming people. Stop going, oh, well, they've got all the luck in the world. For sure, some of us have better luck than others. I'm born into a very fortunate, privileged life. That's just the way it is. But you still have to put the work in to receive the good luck. And yes, nepotism and nepo babies, nepo, but nepotism is a thing. But for most of us, it's not a concern. Everyone's going, oh, David Beckham's son, and went to do those big shoots because he's David Beckham's son. It's like, yeah, that's one person. He doesn't do that much work. I do more work than David Beckham's son does. And yeah, he got a couple of jobs because of who he was maybe. But, he's got his own cross to bear. Everybody's critical of what he does because he's David Beckham's son. It goes both ways. Take your lot, create your own luck, and just get out there and do the work. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.